Dr. Dai Chang said it took her half a year to write the book, but before that, she had to spend 15 years reading thousands of books and studying a range of disciplines to gain a comprehensive understanding of President Ho Chi Minh. She wrote the English version first and then translated it into Vietnamese herself. Chang chose the National Political Publishing House as her Vietnamese publisher.
Now, going to kind of your readers and your audiences in Canada, both Vietnamese and Canadian, what are some of the things they think, or what are some of the thoughts they have on your book?
Yes, I was able to have 4 book launch events in Canada. 2 in Toronto, 1 in Ottawa, and 1 in Montreal.
That one's in Montreal,
yes,
right?
Yes, that is the one in Montreal.
Awesome.
Yes. In Toronto, I had 1 book launch event at the University of Toronto in Scarborough. And the students really appreciate the book. They said that they learned a great deal about Ho Chi Minh that they didn't know before. And we also had another book launch event in Toronto where I invited Canadian politicians. We have MP, Member of Parliament Brian Wilford. We have the former Minister of Citizenship of Ontario, Bob Wong.
Wow.
And we had many Canadian friends and Vietnamese friends, and we had really good discussion on the human perspective of Ho Chi Minh. And then we also had another book launch event in Ottawa, where I received support from the embassy,
of Vietnam.
They participated in the event. And then we also had another event in Montreal. Again, we had great discussion on the life and the cause of Ho Chi Minh for national independence for Vietnam.
Right. Now, for that audience, that particular audience of both Vietnamese and Canadian in Canada, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, what were some of their major concerns or major questions concerning your book?
Well, I think that the question that I got the most would be, what would be your motivation in writing this book? Again, I just feel that I should say what is right. For me, it's a moral obligation. As a researcher, then it's an ethical obligation. That if I see there's a side of Ho Chi Minh that people need to know, then I should say it.
Great.
Dr. Dai Chang's book has received lots of praise from Canadian readers. Bob Wong, former Ontario Minister of Citizenship, writes, in a book, Professor Julie Dai Chang Nguyen traces the life journey of Ho Chi Minh from his youth to that of a revolutionary leader and patriot. Julie Nguyen offers insightful historical and cultural perspectives of a person who has lived in both Vietnam and in the West. Professor André Lalibert from University of Ottawa says, this volume offers an original and fresh account of Ho Chi Minh's contribution to the history of Vietnam, a world leader who has tremendous appeal among youths all over the world during the turbulent era of decolonization in his lifetime. He also emerges in this book as a compassionate human being.
Dai Chang wanted to look at perspectives of Ho Chi Minh, both from a Western background, but also from a Vietnamese background. And this book, which was launched in May of 2010, gives us some unusual perspectives about the patriot, about the fact that Ho Chi Minh really was a nationalist. He started out very clearly wanting to emulate Abraham Lincoln in the United States, the whole issue of the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, really wanting to put forward a Vietnamese face, a Vietnamese view of the world in which, after years of French colonialism, that Vietnam would take its rightful place on the world stage. This book looks at his struggles, both in terms of being in Vietnam and being an exile in Paris. It really shows the human side of Uncle Ho. And there, from that standpoint, this book is very unique because it looks at her background was looking at Western writings, Vietnamese writings. It really comes across her patriotism, her sense of Ho Chi Minh.
In the book, and you have said you took a lot of sources from both the Western outsider point of view and from here in Vietnam researchers, and also in your trips to local parts of Vietnam to learn about Ho Chi Minh. In terms of comparison, do you see differences, similarities in terms of the different views, perspectives on Ho Chi Minh?
I find that Western books tend to look at Ho Chi Minh's political activities, and therefore I think that their view is not complete. On the other hand, I find that the Vietnamese sources talk a lot about his life and his contribution to the country, but the information might not be presented in a systematic way, and therefore I decided that if I could present a book that can close that gap, then it could be helpful to many researchers who are doing research on Ho Chi Minh.
In your book, you talk about kind of Ho Chi Minh's thought on gender equality, and I know that from reading it, gender equality is a big part of your book. So can you talk a little bit about that part? And I know that you're also kind of focusing on gender equality in your international development studies.
Yes. Well, I believe that gender equality is very important for national development. It is not just to bring about equality for everyone in the country, but also to build human capital for the country. According to Ho Chi Minh, when women participated in the revolution, it is not just to liberate the country, but also to liberate themselves.
Right.
And Vietnamese revolution would not be successful without the participation of women. And according to Ho Chi Minh, equality doesn't mean identical treatment. That doesn't mean that it's 50-50, but it means fair treatment. It means equal opportunities for everyone. And the approach that Ho Chi Minh was able to identify and use for Vietnam was the socialist feminist approach to tackle patriarchy, to tackle capitalism because of the exploitation of women. And therefore, I strongly believe that this socialist feminist approach is still very much relevant in today's Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh was able to identify that the road to gender equality would be difficult because of three reasons. One is that the mentality of looking up to men and looking down on women has been in Vietnam for thousands of years. So it's very difficult to overcome. And secondly, it has entrenched in each person mentality and each family. And third, we could not use arms to fight this inequality.
Right.
And so it's still a challenge, not just for Vietnam, but also for many other developing and developed countries in the world.
Talking about your plan to write another book, I understand that you're in your trip here in Vietnam this time in Hanoi. Dr. Nguyễn Đại Trang came to talk with one of the veteran researchers on Ho Chi Minh. So we'll have a look at her visit.
Dr. Đại Trang has never met Mr. Nguyễn Huy Hoan before. At the recommendation of a friend, Trang came to seek advice on her second book about President Ho Chi Minh. The former deputy director of the Ho Chi Minh Museum has nearly 40 years spent researching the great leader of the nation.
Cháu cũng có ý định là trong tương lai gần sắp tới đây sẽ tiếp tục nghiên cứu sâu hơn về Chủ tịch Hồ Chí Minh, và đồng thời cháu cũng có một cái sự quan tâm về cái đề tài là tư tưởng Hồ Chí Minh trong bối cảnh phát triển đất nước hiện nay.
Năm 62 bác đã từng đề xuất ra một ý kiến là quản lý một đất nước cũng như quản lý một doanh nghiệp phải có lãi. Cái gì ra, cái gì vào, việc gì cần làm ngay, việc gì cần chờ hoãn hay bỏ, tất cả đều phải tính toán cẩn thận. Những vấn đề kinh tế như thế là bác nói rất là sớm. Vấn đề đầu tư nhá, vấn đề đầu tư của nước ngoài ngay từ năm 1954 hòa bình lập lại, bác đã phát biểu chúng tôi hoan nghênh đầu tư của nước ngoài.
The veteran researcher encouraged Trang to write her second book about President Ho Chi Minh as a follow-up.
Đất còn rộng lắm. Đấy, chúng ta còn phải nghiên cứu rất nhiều. Nghiên cứu để vận dụng cho đất nước. Và trong chừng mực nào đó mà tôi thấy cái cuốn sách của chị cũng đề cập đến, tức cuốn này không phải chỉ có giá trị đối với Việt Nam mà còn có ý nghĩa đối với một số nước trên thế giới mà hoàn cảnh như Việt Nam thì tôi rất tán thành. Gần đây nhiều nguyên thủ quốc gia đến Việt Nam thì đều ca ngợi rằng chúng tôi học tập cái mô hình và cái tấm gương của Việt Nam, tấm gương đổi mới, tấm gương tìm con đường đi thích hợp cho đất nước mình để cho nhân dân là chóng được ấm no sung sướng. Cái đó đúng lắm.
Mr. Hoan met President Ho Chi Minh personally 6 times. The president himself assigned Hoan, then a teacher of Chinese, to teach Vietnamese to a group of Korean and Chinese students from 1965 to 1967. Hoan retired 13 years ago. Since then, he has still been invited to work at the museum twice a week to transcribe President Ho Chi Minh's handwritten Chinese manuscripts.
So we understand that in this trip, as we just saw in the clip, you came to see Mr. Nguyễn Huy Hoan, who is a veteran researcher on President Ho Chi Minh. What were some of the things, some of the thoughts that you gathered from this visit?
Well, Mr. Nguyễn Huy Hoan is still very, very much hardworking, and he's just great in his work on Ho Chi Minh, and I was so impressed with his comments on the book. For example, he commented on my approach, my new approach to doing research on Ho Chi Minh, and he said that it was absolutely right on. This is what we needed in understanding better Ho Chi Minh, and also to understand his thought and how it is important for Vietnam today. And also he said that I was right on when I discussed the Ho Chi Minh thought.